truth is I never really thought I would be doing this. Even when I was a senior at Trinity Kalin, definitely not when I was a freshman at a different boarding school. I always really wanted to be a basketball player. I went to another boarding school before I went to Trinity Kalin called the Lawrenceville School, and there was this rumor that there was somebody going around bouncing 2 basketballs around campus in the morning, waking people up, and that was me. So for me, it was always about basketball 100% of the time. And you all sort of know what the level of competition is with athletics within these different boarding schools. When I travel across the country, I'm repping all of us and showing off. Does anybody know who? Oh, that's me. That's me playing at Lawrenceville. Does anybody know who this is? Yeah, Joakim Noah, 6'11" center on the Chicago Bulls now. And just so we're being authentic, same jersey. So, yeah, young Joakim Noah. I think he was like Defensive Player of the Year 1 year, right? NBA All-Star a couple times. And then so talking about not just the guys that I never actually got to play with Joakim, he was there a couple years before me, but then talking about the guys who we had to play, particularly in New Jersey. Does anybody know who this guy is? Yeah, Kyrie Irving. He plays with LeBron James on the Cleveland Cavaliers, another All-Star, all sorts of stuff. So for the basketball guys in the room, I had to guard Kyrie, and after the first 2 plays, they're like, "Coach, gotta go zone." So Kyrie Irving ended up going to Duke for a year before going to the NBA, being the #1 draft pick. And so I was playing in these games where I got to look out into the crowd and see all of the different colleges that I dreamed of going to ever since I was like 5 years old. UNC, Duke, all these basketball places, all the people who are in the Final Four now, but they were all watching the guys who were scoring like 40 and 50 points on me. So it dawned on me pretty quickly that I wasn't going to be able to take that route. And actually, it was in the intro, I just wanted, again, being authentic and truthful. That's me as the captain. Oh yeah, there it is. That's me as a captain on Trinity Kalin in like 2009, so not that long ago. I think that might have been taken in 2010. So I didn't get the huge offer that I wanted. I didn't really have a track like the guys that I was playing against or the guys that I was playing with. But I ended up making my way to a smaller college up in Waterville, Maine called Colton. And that's me right there. And that's a baby. That's our coach's baby. This is cool. I never really heard of it. And so upon arriving to campus on this school in the middle of Maine, like not going to be on TV or anything like that, but it was apparent to me how serious everybody on our team took basketball, and it was something that I really vibed with, I really liked. And when I got there, I learned that our team had a code, and we talked about our code as 3 values, as selflessness, toughness, and accountability. So I have accountability behind me because that was the most difficult word for me to embody every single season. So when I was a freshman, there were 2 guys who were older than me, who were in front of me in my position, and so I was just basically a practice player. Didn't get to see the court except for like 30 seconds at the end of the game in 7 games. Sort of an afterthought. If I didn't show up to practice, if I didn't show up to games, I don't know if anybody would even notice. And then going right to my sophomore year, the 2 guys who were older than me, they both graduated. And so now I'm a starter. So I'm a sophomore and I'm playing maybe 25, 30 minutes a game. And I have more responsibilities than just showing up and being on the practice team or that was really important. My presence needed to be felt as a leader on the floor. And that led to me being named a captain my junior year. So my sophomore spring, my junior year, I'm a captain at Colby. And but all of a sudden, we got a new coach. They brought in a bunch of new guys, and I was regulated to a backup. So now thinking about responsibility, accountability, like I gotta be the guy that's excited, making sure everybody's accountable, showing up to everything, learning out our codes. But at the beginning of the game, I'm going to sit on the bench, and I'm not going to get to play that much. And then going into my senior year, even more young talent came in, and I was regulated back to the bench where I was when I was a freshman. So again, 2-year captain, but now I'm a reserve on the bench. What is there for me to be accountable for? How can I embody these values? And me and the two guys to my right here decided that there was something that we could be accountable for. There was something that we could be accountable for.
Colby men's basketball season ended a few weeks ago, but the program has been thrust into the national spotlight thanks to a compilation video that we made that has gone viral. Usually it's the stars that receive the attention in sports, but the Colby men's basketball team's bench players spent the season engaging in a sort of sideline performance art to rally on their teammates, and it's given them local celebrity.
It's been fun to see the reaction, a lot of positive responses out there. It's been great for the guys to sort of get the notoriety.
Early in the season, the coach insisted the bench find a way to increase their energy. And did they increase their energy?
We got 4 bench warnings this year from referees due to our excessive antics.
The impromptu skits motivated teammates and irritated opposing crowds.
I remember Pat Stewart coming off the court and says to us, I'm sorry for missing that 3. Like, I saw you guys all getting up ready for something. Like, I was excited.
I remember one time at Amherst, they had the whole student section do the gentleman's celly, and they all, like 200 kids got up and clapped at the same time, which it's kind of cool to see, like, we're making such an impact on the game that the other team's student section feels the need to come back at us.
They admit the viral video is nice, but the results on the floor are what matters.
Two straight 7-win seasons, and this year we won 14. So, I mean, just the energy that we put in just signifies, developing a whole overall culture that says, do everything you can to make the team better.
John had a good point in that story. You can make an impact on the bench.
Absolutely. All right, Travis. Thank you.
Thank you, Travis. All right, we'll be right back.
So what we figured out is that even though we were on the bench, we had front row seats. And if we had front row seats, that we could be the loudest team with the most creative sideline in the country. Some of you may have seen Monmouth University doing stuff similar to this year. Total plagiarists, because this was the year before that. And so going back, this photo was taken almost 2 years ago today. It was taken on April 1st, 2014. I remember the date because when our coaches said ESPN was coming to do a photo shoot on you guys, we all thought that they were pulling a huge prank on us, but we got there and it was the truth, and there was a whole segment on us before the Final Four in 2014. And so, but I'm here to talk about consent. I'm here to talk about party of consent. I'm here to talk about building communities that are free of violence. And so for me, I forgot this was in here. So I started coaching high school basketball at the Wheeler School in Providence, Rhode Island. And this is some of my players taking off after their inspiring coach. You can imagine what it looks like. They're doing the field goal game. You're going to give it a try? Don't worry about it. Okay. Yeah, you can imagine. Okay. So similarly, when we think about the topic of sexual assault, this is something that sort of happens behind closed doors. It happens in places that it's really difficult to step in, as far as I see somebody fall down, I can easily walk up to them and help them up. With something like this, where people are vulnerable in situations where there's not a ton of people who can immediately step in and do something about it, moment of, it's a similar sort of feeling. It's a similar sort of feeling as being a senior on the bench, a senior captain on the bench. What can I do to be accountable? What can I do to make a difference about this? And so I really took this idea around accountability, and for me it was really significant within my academics, really significant within my athletics, but it wasn't clear to me until I went to college that there was also another platform around where accountability was significant, which was my community. And similar to sort of seeing accountability within different contexts that I learned when I was a basketball player at Colby, I tried to channel that and bring that into the community societal realm at Colby. So that's where Party with Consent came out of. And so just to give you some idea, so these shirts, I made these shirts about 4 years ago now, and there's about somewhere between 11 and 12,000 of them in the world now, maybe like 10,000 of these cups. And I'm always so grateful and inspired to travel across the country and now in Canada, talking about how this came about and what's really behind this effort. And so again, for me, it was this opportunity that said, if you're on the bench, nobody's gonna say, you know, why didn't you cheer more, right? They're gonna, if the team loses, they're gonna look at the players on the court. And so the same thing happened here, is that, you know, it was easy for me, particularly as a guy, as a male athlete, to say, you know, I'm not the one doing this, so who cares? Like, I don't have to say anything. But pushing ourselves to think, me and really this group of friends and some other people, to think, wait a minute, like, you know, we can do this on our bench, why can't we do this in our community? Why can't we speak up around something that we feel like we have no power on, and take back some of that power with our own voice? And so now transitioning, going back to the idea of accountability, a lot of people have questions for me around why it is that I care about this. And I shared with you a little bit about how I cognitively made some decisions to get to this point. But for me, being a male athlete and being a guy on campus, it was something that made people uneasy, me talking about consent, me being the guy who's going around speaking at different places on campus about sexual consent. So it became very clear to me that I needed to be fully conscious and reflective on why it is that I came to this issue and why I care about it. And it also helped me because a lot of my male peers weren't coming to conversation with me. So instead of being frustrated and looking at my peers and saying, hey, why aren't you guys showing up? Looking inward and saying, why is this so urgent to me? So when I went to that, I found that something that was really significant was something that happened to me when I was 12 years old. That's not me when I was 12 though. That's Richard S. Kalin, my dad, and his Illinois driver's license. And when I was 12, I went to a basketball camp at Princeton University. And it was the last day, and I wasn't expecting my dad to show up and be there. But he was, and I was thrilled. I knew my mom was going to be there. My dad had a meeting in the area. And when he came, I remember being so excited to see him. I gave him a huge embrace. I headed off in my mom's car. We headed home. He headed off to his meeting. We got home. I'm sure a lot of you have been to camps like these, or even preseason and stuff like that here in Millbrook, where for like a week of intensive exercise, I was so tired I crashed at like 6. I fell asleep in my bed, and when I woke up in the morning, I went down a staircase, and I was able to look out a window, and I still didn't see my dad's car. But I did see my aunts and my mom's best friends. And when I walked outside, I kept walking, I got to the door. Our house had a little patio. I could just see my mom's back. And she had a blanket dripped over her. And I remember I went right next to her and I sat down next to her. And I remember when she looked at me, I could tell that she hadn't gotten any sleep that night. And she had clearly been crying all night. And I could see a look of concern on my mom's best friend and my aunt's face. And in that moment, when I was 12 years old, my mom shared with me that her words were, "John, Dad's car hit a skid on the road. It was a rainy night. His car went off the road and he hit a tree and he didn't make it." And so when I share this story, it's not because right after my dad died, I started thinking about sexual consent or sexual violence or how to prevent it. But what I think did happen was that I was an only child. I didn't have a very close extended family. And my family was just sort of me and my mom. And the first part is that my mom, particularly interested in giving my experience playing youth athletics, but my mom was always the toughest person I knew. So when people told me, guys gotta be tough, girls aren't tough, that just didn't ever click with me because I had my mom modeling toughness for me every day. And more or less, as far as models around masculinity, I was more or less on my own. And at 12 years old, I'm Jewish. When I was 12, I had my bar mitzvah, welcoming me into being a man, and sort of on my own to figure it out. And so that left me with a lot of questions. I was curious about this whole idea of masculinity. I found myself posturing and acting like I knew what I was talking about because I didn't really want anybody to know this vulnerable thing within me that was my dad had died. And my friends in middle school knew, but I went off to a boarding school, and so not everybody knew there. And so I always wanted to make sure that there wasn't people questioning whether or not I was manly enough. And so I had these questions about it. I was posturing about it. And when I went to college, I saw this man share an activity called the man box. And it's the most clear that I've ever been. After he showed me this exercise, it's the most clear I've ever been on what is being talked about or what is being said when we talk about masculinity. And this is, to give you context, this guy's name is Tony Porter, and he runs an organization called A Call to Men out of North Carolina, I think it's Charlotte. And so together we're gonna do the man box. It's an interactive activity. Sorry, people in the back. If you can shout out or loud, I'll be able to get it. I'd rather do this popcorn style. Obviously, if it gets too raucous, we'll need to calm things down. So the activity is interactive, only 3 questions. Man box is made up of only 3 questions. The first question is, when I ask you in your head right now to think of the characteristics that embody a real man, what do you see? So there's a couple of really interesting and important things to think about when we're looking at a man box. I hope everybody can catch a glimpse. So the first part is when we look at the words in black, we can see pretty clearly, right, that these words are derogatory terms that are connected to women or folks in the LGBTQ community. And on its own, just using language like that, the idea that if you're not being a real man, if you're not being strong, if you're not tall, if you don't have an awesome jawline, if you're not all these things that we sort of see and that are really clearly put together in the man box around strength and confidence, and then we're calling people who aren't that, we're calling them either something feminine or something that describes the LGBTQ community. We're immediately, with these words, as much as we can say, oh, I don't really mean it that way, oh, I don't really mean it as a big deal, we're creating an environment that says being a heterosexual man is here, and being a woman, a gay man or a gay woman, are all down here, just with our words. And for me, right, I shared with you my narrative about my mom showing me toughness more than anybody else, more than my toughest basketball coaches who would scream at me. Nobody could show me toughness in the way that my mom did. This was all sort of counterintuitive to me, because for me it was clear that the woman in my life was always being strong and tough. So I think I share this in different ways at different schools. Meeting some of the leaders here at Millbrook, meeting some of your teachers and some of the administrators here, I'm under the impression that schools like Millbrook can rid themselves of words like pussy, bitch, fag, queer, homo, feminine, soft even, to make insults or to bring other people down. There's just, number one, there's just so many other words that we can use. People get pretty creative with that. So that's the first point. And then the second point is that even if there are words that don't resemble something that's feminine or gay, what this box basically does to young men did to me when I was in high school, when I was a senior, junior, sophomore, or freshman, is that it was saying, you gotta be in here all the time. You gotta be in this purple. And so even if somebody called you a bitch, you really knew what it meant, that you had to get back inside. If somebody called you a girl, you really had to get back inside. And even culturally specific ones like jabroni or something like that. You knew that. You knew what it meant. You knew that in that moment, you weren't being in the man box enough. And for me, things like being emotional, being in touch with and being vulnerable, all those things are what has connected to me the opportunity to be speaking in front of all of you. I was not in this place to share the story of my dad dying when I was in high school, when I still felt that I was in the man box, when this was really taking control of me. And this is something that's pretty invisible. This is something that when we move around in our lives, as particularly young men I'm talking to right now, and boys, we don't even really feel it. We feel it from everywhere, but it's so hard to touch and see. But this is something that when I was in high school, I knew it controlled most of my decisions. It controlled my desire to have muscles, my desire to grow a beard quickly, to always show that I was being strong. And the truth is that I wish I knew when I was in high school, is that nobody can exist in this box always. What encompasses all of us is all sorts of different emotions, weaknesses, vulnerabilities, times when we're not sure what's going to happen, times when we're nervous, times when we're anxious. And if we're not allowing ourselves as men to let those feelings out and show them, then we're severing off a big part of our life in an idea of showing ourselves off as somebody who doesn't feel those things when we actually really do. And this is something that I'm very grateful for Tony to show to me and helping me understand that masculinity is a social construction. So it's something that we create as a society and decide what it is. But it's very easy because of sex, female and male, to think that these things are sort of connected to biology, that men are supposed to be strong. But that's really a social thing, because it's broken down every single day with men being vulnerable and women being strong all the time. So if you have any questions about this, we can talk afterwards. For the sake of time, I'm gonna keep going through. So I'm thinking about going on my journey, going into high school. When I'm reflecting on, when I'm thinking about why did I come to parties with consent, why is it something that I care about, I go back to thinking about where was it when I was 19 years old, when I was 18 years old, about to go into college. Where was it that I learned sexual consent? Because my mom grew up with Catholic values, and she was not ready to talk to her 18-year-old son about sex, let alone sexual consent. And when I was in school, sexual education sort of was more of a scientific thing. I learned a lot about percentages of STDs. I didn't learn a ton about how to communicate around consent. I didn't really learn a ton about talking with my partner. But I had to learn it somewhere because I didn't go to college not knowing about sex. I went to college fully aware of sex, and I really wondered, where did I learn this? Where did I get these ideas about what sex and sexual consent look like? And I went to, there's a slew of them, but I picked out these movies. Are these still relevant? Superbad. He got game, even he got game. That's an old one. I saw that when I was like 5. So if you picture this, if you picture myself being 18 years old, ready to go to college, and I haven't had really anybody talk to me about sexual consent yet, as I just explained. And so I'm learning it here from these movies that are awesome for their drama and their comedy and their ability to engage us, but not exactly the greatest consent education. And so this is a clip. This is like a 2-minute clip from Superbad, where consent is discussed pretty clearly. Really quickly, listen. That consent is discussed pretty quickly, and it's discussed pretty much the way that I discussed it with a lot of my friends when I was 18 years old. And so what Jonah Hill and Michael Cera do is they affirm a lot of the anxieties that we were feeling, and they come to some conclusions about consent that I'll ask you about after the clip. But imagine this. Imagine going into college with this being your education around what sexual consent looks like. Evan, get into the game.
Take it over to me.
Chad, get off the field!
Dude, get out of here. They're gonna make me run laps again.
Dude, just fucking listen, okay? Jules and her stupid fucking friend came up to me, and they asked me to buy her alcohol. But not just her, for a whole party. You know what that means? By some divine miracle, we were paired up, and she actually thought of me enough to decide that I was the guy she would trust with the whole funness of her party. She wants to fuck me, she wants my dick in or around her mouth.
To get her out from you? She doesn't want your dick.
Yes, of course I thought that. That's like the first thing that came to my mind. Just listen.
My older brother always says like the nastiest shit. Like he called me Hyman until I was 12. Seth, I want to blow you.
She didn't say that. She didn't say the second part, but the first part. She's got an older brother, and she could have asked him, but she asked me. She looked me in the eyes and said, "Seth, Mama's making a puby salad, and I need some Seth's own dressing." She's DTF. She's down to fuck, man. P-U-G. She wants to fuck, man. It's an actual possibility.
You just sound like an idiot. You're not gonna be able to sleep with her, man.
Yo, dude, I don't want to talk all that shit, okay? But she's gonna be at the party, and she's gonna be drunk, and she likes me at least a little, enough to get with me. At the very least, I'll make out with her. 2 weeks hand job, 1 blowjob, whatever. And then I make her my girlfriend. And I've got like 2 solid months of sex. By the time college rolls around, I'll be like the Iron Chef at Pound and Vaj.
Calm down, Greg. It's soccer. It's soccer.
Fuck you, man.
Hey, Greg, why don't you come dance?
That was like 8 years ago, asshole.
You wanna hear the next part? Becca, you do the same thing with her. When you guys are shit-faced at the party, you get with her. This is our last party as high school people. I fully ignored my hatred for Becca and coming up with this plan. I'm flexing nuts. Just fucking come with me on this voyage and just stop being a pussy for once, and we can fucking fuck some girls already.
I should buy Becca alcohol?
Yeah, now we pimp. That way you know she'll be drunk. You know when you hear girls saying like, "Ah, I was so shit-faced last night. I shouldn't have fucked that guy." We can be that mistake. Alright, you talk to Becca, I'll talk to that retard fool. Don't worry.
Seth, get off the field!
Come on!
So okay, obviously, a hilarious 3 minutes. But again, thinking about it as far as consent education, you know, the part that stands out for me, and just quoting Jonah Hill, is You know, about how chicks saying, oh, we were so shit-faced last night, we shouldn't have fucked those guys. We could be that mistake. And so for me, going into college, consent wasn't only something that was like worth disregarding, but it was something that these people who were on the big screen were saying was actually cool to disregard. So this education that I was having, without sort of conversations with my mom, without specific sexual consent conversations that I had in school, were this. And there's nothing wrong with this alone, right? This is funny, but for me, nothing broke down the fact that I'm blanking on the name, Jonah Hill and Michael Cera are talking about right there, it's not in line with sexual consent. And so I'm going to college and I'm having people who are a lot older than me tell me what sexual violence looks like and what consent is and is not. And all I can think about is like, okay, I get all of that, but when's the part when like we do what Jonah Hill was saying, right? In my head, I'm saying, yeah, that sounds nice and that's cool, but like, this is what's in my brain. Because this is what I've been learning subconsciously, my subconscious, ever since I was in 6th or 7th grade. And so the point here is when we deconstruct this, the reality is like, this is a great comedy, it's like classic. But Jonah Hill and the people who wrote this script, the people who made this, they're not the authorities on consent. And through this medium, they're educating most of us who are anxious and thinking about college and even high school around topics around sexual consent and sex. They're educating us with sort of false sense of reality. That when you go into college, I do this conversation with a lot of Division I athletes, and a lot of times you'll hear the seniors even saying, like, to the younger guys, they'll be saying like, guys, you really don't want to be somebody's mistake. Like, it's sort of like funny to watch here, but it's not something that we all think is cool. And even if you're in places where people think it's cool, understand that it's crossing the line around sexual violence. And so for me, thinking about it further, right? If the first day of college, somebody comes to me and says, "Hey John, we're gonna go get some chicks drunk and we're gonna have sex with them," that sounds cool. You know, I'm not gonna say that sounds like predatory behavior, that's out of line with sexual consent at our school. Or am I gonna say, yeah, dude, like that's what Jonah Hill said college was all about. I was probably gonna go with the latter when I was a freshman in college, until I was able to deconstruct some of this stuff. So just to juxtapose that, I wanted to share just a couple of sentences from a college definition of consent. So effective sexual consent means informed, freely given agreement, communicated by clearly understandable words or actions to participate in each form of sexual activity. Consent cannot be inferred from silence, passivity, or lack of resistance. By definition, there is no consent when there is a threat of force or violence or any other form of coercion or intimidation, physical or psychological. So, again, just making that as clear as I can, that while funny, just about that whole entire spiel that Jonah Hill gives to Michael Cera is out of line with that definition. So, something to be considering here at Millbrook and then when you go off to college as well. Got it. So this guy Jackson Katz, introduced me to an exercise. Jackson Katz runs a program called Mentors in Violence Prevention out of California. And he showed me an exercise. The exercise needs some context. When I was a freshman at Colby, I pieced together these ideas about masculinity. I was still navigating it and figuring it out. I knew that I cared about being a good community member. I knew I still cared about basketball. But it still wasn't clear to me that sexual violence was an issue. I still thought it was something that happened at a gas station or behind the bushes. And when I was a freshman in winter, a friend of mine, she told me to come up to her room. She had been at college for a couple years before me. And so I went to her room, and there really wasn't a ton of emotion. It was just a very straight shot. John, I was raped here. So raped here at this college that is ranked in the top liberal arts colleges everywhere you look. And the first thing I thought in my head was, no way. Like, this can't happen at a school like Colby. But that had something to do for me. It's easier for me to reflect on that when I was 18 or 19 years old and say, I was such an idiot. But if I reflect with myself on myself with compassion, I realized that I wasn't trying to be an idiot. I wasn't trying to be malicious. I just never had to think about this. And I can't say for sure, but for me, growing up in my community as a boy was a lot different than growing up as a girl, particularly around sex and sexual violence. For me, it was something that I never had to think about. I was always with some of the biggest guys at the school, and we never really had anything to fear, whether I was in high school or in college. And all of this became clear to me, and why this is significant, and why like this just wasn't clicking for me with a simple exercise that Jackson Katz does with MVP. So this activity is only 2 questions. And the first question is for the guys. So, guys coming to Millbrook, and then some of you who are going off to college, and just in your life in general, what are some things that people tell you or share with you that you should be doing to prevent yourself from being sexually assaulted? Nothing? I got nothing. And so now, the second question is for the women, the girls, the young women in the room. Before going off to college, in your day-to-day life, what are things that people have told you before a night of going out to do to protect yourself from being sexually assaulted? Don't walk alone. Hold on.
Don't put your drink down.
Don't put your drink down.
Alright, come back. Wait, everybody was silent for the guys part, so if we can just have this be just with the girls and young women.
Have your phones.
Have your phone.
Don't put your cup down.
You got that.
Tell someone where you're going. Stand back and get your number.
Stay. Somebody said? Wherever you want. Okay. Thank you. Okay. I'm sure there's a lot more, just for the sake of time. Thank you. Thank you. So, diving right into the point here. When I was 19 years old, a friend of mine shared with me that she was raped at my college. I thought that there was no way that could happen because nobody was talking to me about this. Just like a lot of the guys in this room. And that obviously doesn't mean that this isn't something that men should and do need to consider and think about. And when, for me, my experience at Colby, I could go anywhere. Nobody's telling me don't put my drink down. Nobody's telling me to walk around with my key between my hands. I wandered around at night. I was going all over the place, bouncing from place to place, going to different parties, having my autonomy there. I never had to have pepper spray. I never had to have a whistle. My phone died basically every single time I went out. What else? I never even thought of my key to my dorm room as a weapon once. I always just thought of it as a key to my dorm. And so for me, what this is an opportunity for me to share with particularly the young men and boys in the audience, is that this is what male social privilege looks like. We have the luxury of remaining oblivious on this topic. And so that's how we sort of define it, being the luxury of remaining oblivious. So this is something that I didn't have to think about that much going to college, and still men aren't prompted to think about this as much as women are. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't happen, particularly speaking to the guys, but to everybody. Just because this isn't something that you have to think about doesn't mean that it's not something that happens. And that's something that I had to learn in a way that that became pretty serious in wanting to be a supportive friend to my friend Nicole. Again, if you have some questions on this, feel free to talk to me afterwards. We're gonna keep going. That was the last exercise. I'm just gonna leave you all with some information before you go. So just some stats about what perpetrators of sexual assault are. Okay, there's a lot of myths around sexual assault. So some facts really quickly from RAIN, which is a national network on this topic that collects data. 98% of rapists are men, whether the victim is a man or a woman or genderqueer. But that certainly doesn't mean that 98% of men are rapists. In fact, it's almost the complete opposite. When we hear things like 1 in 6, 1 in 4, 1 in 5 women are raped by the time they finish college, we usually rape or sexually assaulted by the time they finish college. We usually think that, okay, maybe that means that there's just as many rapists out there, but actually the most recognized research on this presents that most who perpetrate sexual assault are repeat offenders. Some of them are knowing to do this multiple times, some of them are not knowing to do this multiple times, and perpetrating as many as 6 sexual assaults per person. But there's new research out now that shows that those who perpetrate sexual assault oftentimes are one-time offenders. So it just speaks to what we're trying to do with party with consent as an overall culture shift on this whole entire topic, because it's not like just going out with pitchforks and trying to find out who these people are. This is about survivors. So in the sexual violence prevention space, you usually use the term survivors rather than victim. And so for survivors, some pretty staggering statistics that 70 to 80% of assaults go unreported. 90% of survivors have some sort of relationship with the perpetrator, right? So when I was in college thinking that this was a random guy who hopped out of the bushes, the fact that 90% of the people who are doing this are non-strangers to the survivor. And 50% of these assaults are happening within 1 mile of the survivor's home. So just to put that in context, like I didn't really think that my college was a place where something like this could ever happen, but these stats sort of point to the exact opposite. And then a really significant one is that only 3% of reports end up being false. So that's something that gets a lot of attention, but 3% is right in line with basically any other crime, that 3% of reports turn out to be false. And then just like an anecdote for me is that survivors respond to this in many different ways. And given these statistics, if a friend discloses to you, just always start by believing it. For me, it's just logical, given the stats that I just shared. And so the last part, this is about us. This is about us on the metaphorical bench, right? Going back to the beginning of this. What about us? What can we do? So the first prompt for me is to the guys that break through a global nonprofit that does work in India and America. They found in a survey that 80% of guys feel uncomfortable when women are being objectified or disrespected. Right? So I've been at those tables. Whether it's in high school or in college, where something of that sort is happening, and it feels like you're sort of on an island. If you have like knots tied up, it's like, I don't want to be the guy who says something about this. But the reality is if you're at a table of 8 guys and you say something, you're at a table of 10 guys and you say something, there's likely to be 7 guys who are thinking something pretty similar. And probably a couple guys who will thank you for saying it because it's a very courageous thing to do. And then finally, and this is some of the ideas behind what party youth consent is and why we created a slogan and a logo that is neon and trendy. Because if you speak out about sexual assault yourself, Breakthrough, this nonprofit, found that your friends are 40% more likely to speak out about it themselves. So if you think about that, in changing this culture, the reality is that the person who stands up and cheers on the bench and does something about it, that can spark a bunch of people standing up and cheering on the bench and doing something about it. And before you know it, you went up on the equivalent of ESPN or main local news. So just to say that speaking out about this is something that it feels like not a big deal. It feels like not a huge deal to say I party with consent or anything like that. But in changing the culture around this, it's probably the most significant thing that we as individuals can do in our daily lives, along with being introspective and empathizing and thinking about how we can socialize, particularly around our gender, given this topic. So that's it for the information. This is a quote by T-Pain, which we put on our first Party with Consent tank tops. Don't do it because it's cool, do it because you're cool. And my goal isn't to leave here and say, Party with Consent, care about this because I said so. My goal is to say, Party with Consent, care about this because you understand why it's significant. You understand why it's important. You understand the connection to creating a community that has intrinsic value for you. You understand that, and it's cool for you. You're not doing it for external applause. And so I'll just leave you with some more of what we've been up to with Party with Consent. They were sort of running a Party with Consent group in Vanderbilt, Party with Consent in Uganda, University of Delaware in Babson College, Foundation Change. So a lot of people on college campuses, and more and more people on high school campuses joining in on it. I have these stickers that I'll just put right here in the front of the stage. And thanks again. If you have any questions, feel free to check out our website and you can email me.